And both of you have taken care of loved ones living with dementia, and it's an amazing job. It's an extraordinary job. And yet the very thing you need the most is your self-confidence, is your self-worth. You've got to feel good about who you are and the care and the love and the support you provide day in and day out. I think what makes this really difficult too is caregivers are put in a position to make some really big, major decisions. And we would love to get the acceptance, the approval from our loved ones with dementia who cannot give it to us. And so the caregiver starts to doubt themselves and they start to question their decisions. And how can we empower the caregiver to believe in themselves and know that the decisions you make are with the best of intentions? If the outcome isn't what we want it to be or what we were hoping it to be, doesn't mean you've done something wrong, right? How do we build up the caregiver's self-esteem and self-confidence to know they truly are amazing and they're doing a fabulous job managing this journey?
Welcome to the AlzAuthors podcast. We're so glad you found us. We're the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. I'm Marianne Sciucco, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter.
And I'm Christy Byrne Yates, a licensed educational psychologist, dementia daughter, AlzAuthor, and coach focused on the sandwich generation. Please join us for bi-weekly episodes with our authors as we talk about their dementia journeys, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help others currently on that path.
We hope these stories offer you comfort and support as we strive to break the silence and stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis.
May one of our authors speak to your experience.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, my name is Christy Byrne Yates, and I'm one of over 300 authors of AlzAuthors.com. I'm also a donor to AlzAuthors. I chose to participate in the monthly donation program because for me, it's easy and efficient. You can donate one time, monthly, or annually. Simply go to AlzAuthors.com/donate. So why do I donate? Let me tell you. The management team at AlzAuthors is such a dedicated and passionate group of volunteers who receive no financial compensation for their hard work. They've gathered and promoted amazing authors who share about their journeys authentically and in many forms. There are books for children, professionals, family caregivers, and for those who've been diagnosed with some form of dementia. AlzAuthors also produces rich content that is completely free through podcasts, special events, and a vibrant YouTube channel. Please consider donating to AlzAuthors today by going to alzauthors.com/donate. And remember, you are not alone. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Untangling, Alzheimer's and Dementia. Today, we're excited to bring one of our ALZ authors to you, and this is Tami Anastasia, who is the author of Dementia Caregiver, Learning to Pace Yourself. So really excited, and I'm here with my co-host, Marianne Sciucco. Marianne, hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you again.
And thank you for having me.
Excellent. We're so excited to have you, Tami. And really excited to hear about your book and about what you're doing. And let's just start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to write your book.
Okay. So I came to write my book because I have a private practice and I've been working with family caregivers for several years on how to care for a loved one living with dementia. And there was just certain things I kept noticing were happening. The doctor gives a diagnosis, they leave, and now what do? They're not aware of the cognitive changes that are going to happen, the behavioral changes that are going to happen, and they're kind of lost. And so I thought, I was always so busy. I didn't have time to write the book, but I had kept notes and I had started a transcript, and then COVID hit. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my time? Right. So I just devoted that year. We were in COVID, couldn't go see clients. And, it took a little while to get Zoom up and running so I could continue seeing people. But during that time, I wrote my book. And the goal of the book was to hold the caregiver's hand, let them know they're not alone, educate them as to things that they can expect, things that are going to happen, how the communication is going to change, how their loved one is going to decline. And so I start from the very beginning of what is dementia, the different stages, some progression, then walk the caregiver through all the behavioral cognitive changes all the way till end of life, even to bereavement, and try to line up their ducks, what to expect as they decline. So in the book, it talks about questions to ask home care agencies, questions to ask care communities. But I also talk about ways to communicate with your loved one as they progress, as their brain progresses. So what you all need to know is about 40 years ago, my grandmother got diagnosed with, back then it was called senility. And my father would come home just brokenhearted, sobbing because he didn't understand what was happening to his mother. Back then, there was no word, no dementia was ever mentioned. It was just a form of senility. And remember, back in that time, they thought it was the pots and pans that they cooked in. So my grandmother, very, very Italian, but fast forward now, and I become a dementia specialist, and oh my gosh, my grandmother's symptoms were classic Alzheimer's. So I wanted to write this book because of what my dad went through, what we went through, losing our grandmother, not understanding what it was, not knowing how to communicate with her. And I thought, I do so many support groups in my private practice. There's just certain things that are reoccurring. Now, everybody's affected differently by dementia, but there are some just basic things that can help the caregiver get through this journey so it's not at the expense of their physical, mental, and emotional well-being.
Yeah, that sounds so wonderful. And I think your connection to your experience with your grandmother certainly is something that you can relate to and then see, wow, learning more about this, how can I share this with people that I'm serving?
Exactly. I just, there's this image of my father coming home sobbing. And, I asked him what happened. Well, I went to go see my mother, and she slapped him, this was one of the nicest people you ever met in your entire life, right? Never, just a kind person. She slapped him and she accused him. He was feeding her grapes and she accused him of feeding her sticks and wanting her to choke. He was devastated by it, but we didn't know what that was then, right? So if we can prepare people a little better as to what to expect and how they're going to change, then we can make this journey better for the person who's living with dementia, and we can make this journey better for the caregiver who is helping and managing their care. It is devastating on so many different levels, and yet we can make it incredibly meaningful if we learn how to connect and know how to approach them in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not taught, right? We're just learning by doing. So if I could provide a resource that would help normalize the journey, educate them, and provide strategies, then I feel somehow I'm giving back to try to help as much as I can those who are struggling with caring for a loved one with dementia.
Yeah. And I think, too, one of the things in looking at your book that I really connected to was you call it the PACE model. Can you tell us a little bit about the PACE model and so P.A.C.E, so pace yourself, but is your subtitle. Can you tell us a little bit about PACE?
Yeah. So we talk about the longest goodbye, right? And this isn't going to happen. And we have to pace ourselves, because when let's just deal with repetitive questions alone can absolutely exhaust our energy. So we don't know, is our loved one going to live 5 years, 10 years, 12 years? I don't want to freak anybody else. My grandmother was 22 years with this. And so my goal is to pace people on this journey. So each of the letters stands for something. So P stands for give yourself permission to trial and error. And permission to trial and error, because everybody's different. And we learn by doing, basically, right? And you also want to give yourself permission to be kind and patient with yourself as you're trying to navigate this journey. Then the A stands for acknowledge their reality, because their reality changes. The brain is being damaged. The brain cells are dying. And so how do we connect and understand their world now while we're trying to keep one foot in our world and relate to them? And then the C stands for compassionate care, not only for the person living with dementia, but also compassionate care and kindness to ourselves. We have self-criticism, we have self-judgment. And so many caregivers I love working with are working so hard. They're beautiful people, they're amazing people, and yet they'll be judgmental. So I wanted to give people an opportunity. How do we deal with our sadness and our loss? A hard day, a bad day doesn't make you a bad person. It was just a tough day. And then the E stands for empower yourself. And I provide resources, educate yourself, what's available. We know it's going to go in one direction. We don't know how fast it's going to progress. So here's where I line up what to expect. Again, the questions for care communities, home care agencies, put an emergency plan together, hospice, questions to ask hospice. And then, of course, the whole bereavement after the fact, because we grieve. I swear we grieve from the day we get a diagnosis, and each time there's a change, each time there's a progression, there's a certain loss. And that grief is different than end of life grief. And it's called ambiguous loss and anticipatory grief. So I talk about that in our book, how we grieve all along this journey on so many different levels. And just, again, how to pace yourself so that this journey, again, is not done at the expense of your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And we know certain things can drain your energy. So that's what the strategies are all about. How to interact differently, how to approach, how to respond in a way that doesn't deplete you 100%, because we don't know how long this journey is going to be.
Yeah. I love that you tie compassion into not just what we're giving to a loved one or someone we're caring for, but that compassion we have for ourselves.
Definitely.
Because, there are so many messages out there about how to do this.
Yes.
And there are people who aren't necessarily educated about dementia telling caregivers
Yes.
what to do. And if you just did this.
Yes.
It's difficult to kind of maneuver through that. So I love the compassion and the empower, and you can put those together and see how that really builds up your self-care protocol so that you can, really be there for them.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
And I have a little section because the ones that can be the most critical are other family members who are either MIA, missing in action. They're not in the day-to-day, and they have all these opinions. And I even talk about how do we deal with the family members that, feel that they're the authority, that are always giving their opinion, and they're not in the trenches 24/7. Yes, your loved one can have a conversation with them on the phone for 10 minutes and they get off the phone. I don't hear anything wrong with dad. I don't hear anything wrong with mom. And here you're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And I always say, invite them to come and stay for 5 days minimum, 24/7. And now let's see what they say, right? So, but the caregiver, And both of you have taken care of loved ones living with dementia, and it's an amazing job. It's an extraordinary job. And yet the very thing you need the most is your self-confidence, is your self-worth. You've got to feel good about who you are and the care and the love and the support you provide day in and day out. And I think what makes this really difficult too is caregivers are put in a position to make some really big, major decisions. And we would love to get the acceptance, the approval from our loved ones with dementia who cannot give it to us. And so the caregiver starts to doubt themselves and they start to question their decisions. And how can we empower the caregiver to believe in themselves and know that the decisions you make are with the best of intentions? If the outcome isn't what we want it to be or what we were hoping it to be, doesn't mean you've done something wrong, right? How do we build up the caregiver's self-esteem and self-confidence to know they truly are amazing and they're doing a fabulous job managing this journey? And I think we want to encourage them to believe in themselves more and more, because it teaches us so many things on so many different levels. And I tell people, my private clients will say, I think I'm getting dementia. And I'm like, no, you're not getting dementia. You're overwhelmed. You're distracted, rightfully so. But most importantly is that you're creating this wonderful care and support for your loved one. And we have to give back to ourselves. And I think that's what happens, right? That fine line between taking care of a loved one and then taking care of ourselves. How do we balance that? Well, we could do that too with what we say to ourselves. Our self-talk affects how we feel. And I really would like to see caregivers give themselves more credit than they really do.
Well, I think your P in PACE, that permission, is so important because, we're still learning a lot about Alzheimer's, about dementia. And if you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's, right? So it can manifest very differently for different people. Some people might have these features, other people might not. And so that permission to try new things is really important. Then there's just kind of, it's like an act of faith, right? I'm just going to have faith that I'm leading with my compassion and my love. And I'm hoping that this works. And then I'm trying to see if that's working. So that's great. I've done a lot of talking. Marianne, did you have some questions too?
Yeah. Tami had mentioned that in her practice, she was finding herself addressing the same types of questions over and over, which I did when I was doing hospital case management work, and I had like a little script that I would be able to roll out for any type of topic. But Tami, what would you say would be like the top question that you would ask? So the one thing that people were looking for?
Well, in my private practice, one of the things I get is how do I deal with the repetitive questions? How do I deal with getting them to shower or take a bath? How do I motivate them to do activities? They just want to sit in a chair. So a lot of them are how to, right? And we have generic, and then we can personalize them. We can tailor them to the specific needs of the people. So when I do speaking events and I do, Q&As, you give out generic information. In my private practice, I get a deeper dive, give me more history and understanding about the person, the relationship. That provides so much insight. But a lot of it is the how to. And then a lot I also will hear is, many of them think they're failing. And I say, listen, we learn from our mistakes. Mistakes are not failures. So a lot of it is, and they're not alone, and I think now dementia, it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, but they still might feel very, very alone. And so a lot of what I do is normalizing. I have this horrible thought about my loved one. I wish my loved one would die, or I get so angry and I don't like them. That's normal. Let's just normalize it. And how do we use those feelings now to empower you? What can those feelings, how can we use those feelings? Like I have 3 questions, right? What are your feelings trying to tell you? What's causing you to feel that way? And then what can you do differently to feel better? And so a lot of it is the self-doubt and the how-tos. How do I do this? How do I do that? And is this normal for someone living with dementia, right? And I think, Marianne, off of something you just said, is there's this huge difference between what's normal dementia behavior, and we are dealing with this drastic change where we want to reason with them. We want to be logical with them. We want to explain to them. And that often is not the thing to do with a person with dementia. So what happens is this dichotomy between what I have to do that may go against what I'm not used to doing, like the lying or fibbing or exaggerating the truth, because it'll keep my loved one happier. But yet in my world, it causes conflict, and help the caregivers work through that conflict, because we're caring for a loved one now with a brain disease. Their thinking is impaired. Their perceptions are distorted. They say things that aren't true. And how do they detach and not take what is said and done personally? So there's a lot of different dynamics, but that's a pretty good overview of the different scenarios that I'll often get.
Yeah, it's like people are continuing to try to interact with their loved one within the confines of their relationship construct before dementia, and realizing the changes that occur and how you have to adapt to them. So like in a parent-child relationship where now you need to take control of your parent and make sure that they eat. Well, that you never did that before. So it's beyond your role as a daughter or son to dictate to them that it's lunchtime and you're going to eat the sandwich, and try to get them to get some nourishment. But I mean, that is like such a huge conflict that so many people encounter.
Very much so, right? And you have role transition. Then we also have to keep in mind, at least in my private practice, we have residual feelings. We have this relationship with this person pre-dementia, and often what can happen is dementia is going to elevate any unresolved issues. It carries over into the dementia care, and we have to process those feelings also. For example, I had a gentleman, he says, my father is manipulating me. And pre-dementia, his father was very manipulative. Now diagnosis with dementia, we have to reframe that, but I have to help process his anger about the manipulation, and then educate him that what your father's doing now is something that's very normal for a person living with dementia. And there you go, right? There's that crossover, and how do we make these distinctions and help you survive this better than let dementia get the best of you, as well as your loved one living with dementia.
It's so hard. And it's, and another situation is in marital relationships or partnerships like that, where you're slowly, you're like moving out of your role as the spouse or the wife, the lover, the best friend. That starts to get stripped away as you become more and more the caregiver. And so you don't even really even have that relationship with your spouse anymore, because they're not capable of interacting or reciprocating.
Right. It becomes very lonely, as we hear of that often. I feel alone. I don't have my partner to talk to, bounce things off of. And there's where now we can't have enough support. The more support, the better. The more support, the better, because the person who was your confidant, the person that was your partner, isn't that same person, that same equal in the relationship. You still have needs. The caregiver still has needs. We have to find ways to meet those needs and find the support, because your needs need to get met too. They're just now not going to be met with your loved one living with dementia. It's a critical transition
and especially
to
if you're still raising children and now you don't have that co-parent available to you to help you make decisions and things, right, Christy?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff you've talked about sounds very familiar to me in the sandwich generation, which is my sort of jam, and that is, and in fact, I was going to ask you a little bit about when you the tendency to want to correct the person who has dementia and is saying something that is nonsensical or completely different from what you know to be reality. Like my mother used to say, "Oh no, I never did such and such." And I'm like, I know you did, like a million times. I got pictures, Mom. I got pictures.
Right.
But
right.
I've come to realize it's connection, not correction, that's most important, right? So, but then you have your children watching this and they're like, "You mean it's okay to just like make things?" No, it's different. And helping them to understand, you don't need to correct grandma. It's okay. You don't need to correct grandpa. Right. Here's why. And then, but there is this kind of belief sometimes with people who haven't heard and learned a little bit of dementia that this, you connect with where they are. And, the quizzing or the you know this is not helpful. It can actually be really harmful because it's cruel on some level. So can you talk a little bit about how you coach your clients through that piece? Because I think that's something that I hear a lot from people as well.
Yes. So I think part of that, to tell you the truth, is we so badly want to hang on to the person we know them to be, who they were. So if I correct them, maybe this won't be so bad. If I correct them, the intent, I believe, is I want to hold on to them as long as I can. And now if I start embracing their world, they are drifting away. They are changing. So part of it is me understanding what is the purpose for doing that, because I think the intent is wanting to do good, but the reaction from the person living with dementia. So I kind of tell my private clients, we get our cues from the person living with dementia. If it's upsetting, if they get angry, if they get agitated, that is our red flag to say we have to do it differently and understand better. We know you want to explain. We know you want to correct. We know your intentions are good because that's what we do with kids, right? And you bring up a great point. The better we educate kids, the less stigma we're going to have. The more we educate ourselves, the less stigma we're going to have. The more comfortable we are being with people living with dementia, the less stigma we're going to have. We can make a difference, but it's a collective difference, right? Not one person has all the answers. So how can I help you, which is going to help them and help others? We educate. But truly, our cues come from the person living with dementia. So let me give you an example. A lot of clients want to tell their loved one in advance what they're going to be doing, when the appointment is. They're going on a trip. And what tends to start happening if we give too much notice to a person living with dementia? Now, this is all varied according to where the progression is. Early is going to be different in how we interact with somebody in the middle or later stages, correct? So, but they'll want to give them a heads up, give them a warning, get them prepared, right? And we all know that can stir the pot. They start getting anxious, they get a stomach ache, and now they don't want to go. So it's this fine line of educating what's truly in the best interest of the loved one living with dementia, and yet help me to understand what the intent and what the purpose is, because the intent and purpose may having the opposite effect. And let's understand why. We'll allow them to let go of it, because that's part of the transition of letting go of who they were. Because as we change, we're changing to meet them where they're at. We have to let go. There's the grief, there's the loss. So we know how to embrace what is and who this person is with dementia. But that being said, you're going to get angry at times. You're going to get impatient at times. You're going to get frustrated at times. This journey is going to be one of emotions and a roller coaster of emotions. Don't beat yourself up. Don't judge yourself, but allow those emotions and feelings to help educate you on what it is us, the caregivers, need to do differently, but not an opportunity to beat yourself up. So I try to use anything and everything I can to help educate, but I also need to meet my caregiver where they're at, and educate them also. So that role transition you talked about, the sandwich generation, right? I mean, there's so many dynamics that play out. So just as I'm teaching them to meet their loved one where they're at, I too need to meet my private client, my caregiver where they're at, so I can help navigate and normalize and educate as well.
So true. And I think the key word there that you've used previously is normalizing, and normalizing these feelings that come up. It's normal to feel anger. Like, all emotions are valid. They're your feelings. Your feelings aren't always your actions, and we have to start realizing what we feel is what we feel, and then we can feel it, and we can then make a decision on how to act. And so then we have behaviors we're trying to put in place. So your educational piece is so important to that, because when you can do that, then it frees people up to feel those feelings and then know, okay, I'm just feeling angry right now, but I know I need to go do this. And that's the thing. It's
right. And again, how do we use those feelings and emotions, not against ourselves, but as a way of bringing to our awareness what's causing me to feel this way, right? What are my feelings trying to tell me? And then what can I do differently to make myself feel better, right? Because telling them not to feel that way isn't so unfair. Right. They're going to feel that way. And we're going to get impatient. We are going to get angry. We are going to get frustrated. But instead of using it against you, allow those to be gifts. Allow those to be things that benefit you, to help you, again, get through the changes, the cognitive changes, the behavioral changes better. And I always tell people, if you feel your blood starting to boil, take a time out. It's okay. Go scream, yell, punch into a pillow, right? Come back out. If you lose it in front of your loved one, because it's going to happen, there's 2 words: I'm sorry. And I'm sorry to them. And please forgive yourself. Please forgive yourself. I'm sorry I got upset. I'm sorry I got impatient. Now let's go ahead and figure out, how do we get through this? Because it's new to everybody. This is new to everybody. And we're always learning, always learning. And some of our best teachers are our loved ones living with dementia.
I think that's true, right? Because it's just definitely the lessons in humanity that we don't necessarily get from books and from everyday life. And then we see the other end of it. And I think too, another thing you talked about was that ambiguous grief and anticipatory grief. And I think that is where a lot of our emotions kind of can sometimes come from, because you started off by calling it the long goodbye, and it could be years that we're saying goodbye to this person that we had this relationship with, and we may, as you've also sort of alluded to, we may have a very complicated relationship with this person. It could be at times that we just adored our parent, and then there are parents that people are caring for who it wasn't like that all the time. And there's a mixed bag in that as well. And so, but the grief then becomes very different, but it's there even before we've lost the person, and that can be something. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about that and how you maybe guide folks in that piece.
Yes. So the grief is there, and we lose who they were, but now how do we embrace who they are? How do we embrace this person now who has dementia, who may have a sense of humor now? Of course, when the personality changes are positive, but now how do we deal with this person who never got angry, now is getting snappy and belligerent and, rude and inappropriate? And here again, I feel really strongly that, for as unpredictable as dementia is, also, though, there are patterns, there are causes, there are triggers. And here again, educating. All right, your loved one's getting angry. Well, are there certain things that are causing that on a regular basis? And let's look at what could be triggering a reaction. So, because more we understand what could be happening, the more we're going to know how to embrace it, the more we're going to know how to respond, the better we're going to approach it. And I think that's the hard thing. We want this quick fix. We want, okay, this happened. Now how do we not have it happen again? And it's not that black and white. And so what I help people do when they call, let's monitor, let's document, let's keep track. Are there triggers? Are there causes? And it's amazing what comes out of that, because often we will see there are triggers and causes. So we have to keep that in mind. And then people living with dementia become very sensitive to our tone of voice, our body language, our facial expressions. So that also is something, that we can educate. So I really try to really understand. I also, especially when they're repeating questions, I want to hear verbatim, what is your loved one saying? Because they're communicating a need to us. All behavior is a form of communication. All behavior is communicating a need. So again, if we understand better what we're trying to find, what we're looking for, the better prepared we'll be able to deal with how to respond to them when we have these behavior changes. Now we have to go back to that grief, that loss. I truly feel to some degree it's that grief we have to go through in order for us to embrace. I think that is part of the transitioning period, is letting go of who they were in that relationship. So I can now embrace this person that I love and adore. Now you have a conflict, though. You have parents who abuse their kids, and the kids are now caring for a parent living with dementia. So you have to understand each person and who they are, the relationship, the dynamics. And I go for a real deep, deep, deep dive on the dynamics. And the other thing you keep in mind with people, you have this relationship, you've been married 40, 50 years, but what was their childhood like? What was their parenting like? What was their family dynamics like? Because as dementia progresses, they can start reliving past memories. They can relive past things that have happened to them as though they're happening today. And here again, understanding that is going to teach me and help me to help the caregiver know how to intercede with that, how to provide a compassionate, caring, loving response, a reassuring response. Because I think and you guys let me know what you think, Marianne and Christy, isn't part of the deep, deep root of their world is so unfamiliar that there's got to be a lot of fear there. There's a lot of underlying fear, and they need that reassurance. They need that comfort. And we still have to take care of the caregivers who are taking care of them. So you see, there's so many dynamics that play out. I basically meet them where they're at. Wherever the person, they call me, they tell me where they're at. I meet them right where they're at. And then I know how to I know the questions to ask because my counseling background, and how to kind of know where to go with it. And it's going to vary person to person because everybody's unique. Every relationship is unique. I learn from them by the information they share with me. But no matter how you look at it, yes, it's a long goodbye to what was. Oh, but how beautiful and loving can it be when we learn how to embrace what is and yet still take care of ourselves and get our needs met differently. So caregiver guilt is a big issue. Marianne had asked me early on. That is a huge issue that I deal with, is the guilt that they carry. And I help them work through that.
Yeah, no, that's
right.
So true. So true. And just lots of really great nuggets in there, Tami. I really love it. And I'm just sitting here paging through your book as we're talking, and I'm just thinking that you have so many rich resources in here, and sort of you present it with a lot of framework. So I can tell you have sort of that case management sort of approach to doing this. And
well, I have a little secret. So when I wrote this book, I wanted to, because I have so many private clients as well, support group, and I go to speaking events. I wanted to write the book in a way that they felt that I was talking to them one-on-one, right? And because of all the experience I've had working with different caregivers, how do I write this book in a way that speaks to them, but they're inundated, they're overwhelmed, right? And I don't want to give them a book too that they have to read from the beginning all the way to the end, because So I wanted to provide a resource. Oh, how do I deal with repetitive questions? How do I deal with my anger? How do I deal with the grief? How do I deal with the repetitive questions? The refusing to take medication, right? So I really wanted this to be a resource that basically it's like a guidebook kind of, right? Whatever the issue is, you go to table of contents, boom, it's right there. But the thing I'm most proud about the book, believe it or not, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, I wanted to make it easy to read. The font is large enough. We put spacing enough between the sentences so that the caregiver is inundated. They might be angry, they're frustrated, that make this easy to read. The content may be hard, but make it easy for them to read. And I'm actually very proud of that. I spent a lot of time thinking, who's my audience? And to provide them with a resource that is hands-on and they feel they're not alone. It's educational, it provides care strategies, and it normalizes the journey. So that, I know it sounds silly, but that's what I'm most proud of, is we wrote the book in a way that I really wanted to be simple and easy access to information.
Well, I definitely think you got there.
Yeah, I get a lot of compliments on how it was written.
It is. I've got myself on blur, so you can't see it, but it is very. It's laid out very well, and I love the way you have. Yeah, like you said, you can go to the table of contents and find some things. But I like, I like the PACE acronym, and at the end you end with 4 Ds, and it's just very easy to remember because it is overwhelming. So it's nice to be able to be accessible. So I think understanding your audience is really important too.
That was critical. The editor and I went back and forth. And I'm like, I'm winning out on this one. I said, I know my audience. I deal with them every day. And I just really, and then the 4 Ds of dementia care, how do we apply those to the challenging behaviors? In the back of the book, I talk about 11 of the most challenging. I don't even like to call them challenging behaviors, difficult behaviors, the things that caregivers struggle with the most, and how to apply those 4 Ds. Well, if that's all you want to know, you can go right to that part of the book. It's just the way it was, the way we put it together. I just want people to know that I spent a lot of time thinking about who my audience is, and to make this hands-on and a resource that isn't going to require a lot of time and energy to get through.
So what are the 4 Ds? Can you tell us?
The first D is detach. Try not to take what your loved one says and does personally, and be willing and open to changing your thinking and your approach. And, that's much easier said than done. And then the second D is to document. Let's see if we can identify triggers, if we can identify causes, if we can identify patterns. And then the third D is to diffuse. And I teach people how to diffuse. It's pretty much, how to communicate with a loved one. And there's, 3 steps. Listen first and validate, and then reassure, provide a reassuring, comforting response. And then the fourth D is to distract. Some people call it redirect, but distract with activities or stories or movies. But in my book, I list a lot of different activities, ways of distracting your loved one, because again, it's so individual, right? And so those are the 4 Ds, and how to apply those 4 Ds to situations that are very challenging and very frustrating to deal with. Yeah,
that's great. And I love it that it is, like I said, very straightforward and easy to remember, right? We can remember 4 Ds. We can remember. We can remember PACE, and even if we have to stumble through, what does it stand for? I'm like, I know it's something that I need to go. I need to think about it.
Right. Yeah. But even if you don't remember what the acronym is, you're like, pace yourself. Okay, take a deep breath. Let me meditate. It's still a reminder to slow down, conserve your energy. Mm-hmm. So, it's just, again, it's a great acronym considering what's involved. And if you don't remember each of the letters, that's okay. Just remind yourself to be kind and to pace yourself. Kind to yourself and pace yourself, because as we all know, caregivers are the backbone. They are the backbone of all of this. And we have to help support them, but they also need to be willing to get as much support for themselves. And I think that's a hard one too. It's very hard for them to ask for help and to get support. And I really encourage that, because again, this person you had this relationship with, they're not going to be that equal. They're not going to be that person that they were before, and you still have needs. And we have to take care of you too, right?
So, can you read to us from your book? Did you come prepared to read a little section?
I did actually. So the part I'm going to read is one of the things that that you had asked early on is like, what's something that I hear frequently? And something I hear frequently is that the care partner wants this acceptance and wants this approval that I'm doing a good job, I'm taking care of you. And as we all know, they're not able to verbalize that. So I'm very fortunate that some of the families will ask me to go and I do it Zoom now to speak with the loved one who has dementia very early on to tell me what this is like for them, what their concerns are. So what I am going to read to you is actually what one of the a client of mine who has dementia wanted to share with his wife about, when I lose my ability to speak, I want you to know this. And I shared it in my book. So I'm going to read a little part of it. Okay. So it says, in this case, I use the wife just for identity purposes. And what if Deborah, so Dijon was the one caring for Deborah. What if Deborah had said, I know you will take excellent care of me. I want you to trust your decisions on my behalf because you will be making those decisions with my best interests at heart. I will slowly lose my ability to communicate this message to you. And no matter what happens, if my personality changes, or if I say and do things that are hurtful, or if I don't cooperate when you're trying to help me, please remember, I'm not doing this intentionally. It's dementia causing me to do these things. Every step of the way, know that I love you and I thank you. I support whatever decisions you make, even if I don't express my support, and instead I get angry and appear unhappy. Please know that my reactions aren't because you're making the wrong decisions. My reactions are because of dementia. I want to apologize in advance for what you may go through while taking care of me. My inability to express my gratitude will be due to dementia, but know that I am grateful for everything you do. For me, this is true even if it means I need to be moved to a care community. Please remember my words and not what dementia takes away from me. And I get a lot of letters and a lot of notes, emails on just that alone, how much peace it's brought people, because they remember and they try to remember they are doing the best that they can. And although we may not get that acceptance and approval, again, it goes back to really empowering the caregiver to know you're doing a great job taking care of your loved one. And we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along. So that's, in my opinion, that's my favorite part of the book, because it provides, that acceptance and approval. Yeah.
Right. So where can people find your book?
So you can find it. It is on Amazon. And again, the title is Essential Strategies for the Dementia Caregiver, Learning to Pace Yourself. You can also go to my website and order it through my website as well. And then, of course, if anybody wants to, I have a lot of care communities and home care agencies are buying them by bulk because they give them out to their families or people who are touring or anybody who's having conflict. Then just reach out to me directly and I can give a discount if we buy them by bulk. And AlzAuthors.
Yes.
Your best resource, AlzAuthors.
Yes, it is in our bookstore.
Yes.
Yeah, our beautiful little bookstore online.
Yes. So I encourage you to reach out to AlzAuthors first.
You also said you had a YouTube channel. So what's on there?
So those are any webinars that I've done that sometimes not everybody, but I do a lot of webinars for different organizations and companies and things like that. So the ones that give me permission that we can post. And then, of course, I do my own. So any of my own webinars are on that channel and you can view them at your leisure at any time.
And are you on social media too?
I am on social media. So in honesty, I'm not a social media person. I'm not high techy, but I do have some TikTok videos that I do twice a week, just to provide some tips or some ideas, some sort of educational something. So I am on TikTok. I have an Instagram, and then also I'm on LinkedIn. But yes, I have the social medias. Yeah. Still trying to get used to that.
Was there anything else you wanted to say to our listeners before we say goodbye?
No, I just really want to thank you both for giving me this opportunity, and truly want to thank both of you for what you do too. I mean, AlzAuthors is amazing. It's an amazing resource. It's a gift. It's a gift to the dementia community and professionals. And Christy took care of her mother. And I want to thank you for what you do. And really, from the bottom of my heart, we're all in this trying to make it the best journey for everybody involved. And it's just wonderful to meet other colleagues and professionals. And we're all just doing the best we can to help get people through this difficult time. So thank you both for what you both do.
It's great that we have authors like you who are out there just on the front lines helping everybody else.
And we have AlzAuthors. I mean, numerous resources, numerous books. If you're not interested in my book, oh my gosh, please go to AlzAuthors, because there are so many beautiful and wonderful resources on AlzAuthors. And I just really encourage you, if you're a dementia caregiver, go to AlzAuthors because of the wonderful resources that are there, numerous resources.
Thank you. And sign up for our newsletter and our virtual events and our podcast.
Yes, and podcasts. Exactly.
And our YouTube channel. We've got lots of things. Excellent. Oh, it's so great.
Thank you for listening to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an AlzAuthors podcast. For more details on this episode, please see the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to it on whichever platform you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information on AlzAuthors, please visit alzauthors.com. While you're there, be sure to browse our online bookstore, where you will find hundreds of carefully vetted books on Alzheimer's and dementia. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please email your thoughts on the podcast to alzauthors@gmail.com. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, totally reliant on donations to do what we do. If our authors' stories move you, please consider contributing to our cause. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony.
Hi, I'm Jean Lee from AlzAuthors. All the resources we offer at alzauthors.com, including this podcast, are brought to you free of charge. Our management team is a dedicated group of passionate volunteers who earn no financial compensation. But to continue our mission to provide valuable resources to dementia caregivers, we need the support of listeners like you. If you'd like to support us, please make a donation at alzauthors.com/donate. We are a 501c3 organization. Remember, you are not alone.